starting out using Dixie Belle peony color, and we're just applying it along all of the edges, the corners, and the edges with a French tip brush. You can see how as I'm going around, we're just basically trying to get the paint on there. There's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason to how I'm applying it. I do try and go with the oak grain, since this does have an oak grain and it's kind of on the heavier side. It's better to do your first layer, kind of do your layers with the grain, so then that way it kind of just gets into the grain a little bit. This is just the understory, so we have a couple more layers to do after this. So right now we're just trying to get it on sporadically. There's not really any rhyme or reason to how I do it. I just like to do the edges and do it that way. After all the front's done, then we will continue the peony color around each side. Now we are on to the next layer of paint, and we are using a custom mixed General Finishes milk paint. Milk paint is not real milk paint. It is General Finishes is basically an acrylic furniture paint. I like it because I can have the colors custom mixed at my store. This is custom mixed to Benjamin Moore 2173-60 Just Peachy. It's a really nice acrylic paint. It does act a lot different than a chalk paint if you're used to a chalk paint. You need to make sure that you're using a synthetic brush when you apply it, one of the things, and if it's fairly thick. So a good way to get a little bit more drying time out of it so you don't get brush marks is to add an extender. They do have an extender that you can add right to it. I really like that. You can add up to 10% extender, and we're just doing a quick dry brush with the grain again over top of the peony that we just did. just going to continue the milk paint just peachy around the sides, following the wood grain like we did before, just to make sure that it kind of gets down in that grain. It works a little better when you have such a heavy grained piece, I guess, like oak. Now that everything's all been coated with the general finishes, just peachy, we're just doing a light sand, making sure there's no goobers or anything like that, and everything looks good. Now we are heading around all of the details with a little of my favorite golden DIY golden ticket. We're just using, I think it's like a 1/2 inch flat brush, just highlighting the details. Now that all the golden ticket has been applied, I am back doing a second layer of the general finishes milk paint, just a very soft layer. I'm not trying to cover up all of the gold. I just want the gold to peek through. Instead of, usually when you see golden ticket, it's kind of as a top coat, but we're not doing it as a top coat. I want it to be part of the understory of our piece. loading my colors onto my palette. I always start with usually furniture paint, chalk paint, or clay-based paint, whichever one that you're using, with a little acrylic. We're starting out with DIY Aviary, Fusion Bayberry, Fusion Upper Canada Green, and some sap green artist acrylic. This is all for our leaves. Now I'm starting to create some very loose leaves, just with a very loose hand, the outline of how I want my leaves to go. We're starting out with the darker greens, which would be the Fusion Bayberry and the DIY Aviary mixed together. I typically do the Bayberry first, and then I kind of go back over it with the Aviary. Just getting all of my outlines of how I want the florals to go on the piece of furniture. Then I'll go back over it with some of the DIY Aviary along with the Fusion Upper Canada Green. Some of it may be a little mixed together, back and forth, still just very loose, very informal leaves. Just trying to get the background down, not really paying a whole lot of attention to whether they really look like detailed leaves or not. Now I began coming around the other side of the piece. Since this is an armoire, I'm going along the bottom, and then we're going to take it up on the side and basically come around as we frame the front, almost like an arbor would be, was my intention. We're going to go ahead and start our base layers of our coneflowers, and we are using Dixie Belle Peony and Artist Loft Magenta to start out with. We will also be using General Finishes Just Peachy from the base and White Artist Acrylic later. Again, I'm starting with the Artist Loft Magenta, our darkest magenta, and we're adding just some loose petals, coneflower petals. This is just the darker layer. Obviously, coneflowers aren't typically so magenta, so fuchsia looking. This is just the base. We're just going around where I think would be a good place to add a flower. We're just gonna keep adding the magenta base color of the flowers all over. I usually do my entire piece all the way around, and then I go back and do the next color and the next layer and the next layer. That's just kind of how I work. So we're going to just keep continuing this all the way around the armoire. Now I'm going to go back with the Dixie Belle peony, a little bit of white, a little bit of our Just Peachy that we had used on the base, kind of mixed together again with a 1/4 inch angled brush. We're just kind of highlighting and going back over what we did to create the smaller petals. Starting our purple phlox, and when I first started these, I made them way more purpley. I went back and changed them a little bit. So the second ones, I went back over these again and made them a little bit more, not magenta, but just a slightly more pinky cast instead of just being all purple. So we're going to start out with a combination of magenta with the diazonine purple mixed together to give it that nice purple look in the really deep colors. It has a lot of diazonine purple, just a little bit of magenta. We're also using Artist Loft powder blue and white. To get the lighter purple, we are using magenta, diazonine purple, and then we're just adding white to it in various layers to get that lighter color, along with the Artist Loft powder blue. The Artist Loft powder blue is not really very blue in it of itself, it's probably quite periwinkle. So it adds a nice touch to the layers. I believe this is number 3 filbert, which is the brush that has the little oval on the end. We're basically just doing kind of little informal X's, Y's, back and forth to get our petals. Remember when you're doing a finish that when you're painting that layers create depth. So the more layers you create, I always like to start dark and then go to light. But layers create depth, and that's what's going to give you the depth of your phlox. Now you can see how I start back over it with the diazonine purple mixed with magenta and then adding some white to add that next layer. I'm not really, it's very loose. I have my white on my brush set so that you get the actual multi-layers of the petals going over and over. We're also throwing in a little of that powder blue. Just continue to go around the piece wherever I think some phlox would look pretty. You can see that I've also added some pretty yellow daisies. Also, the yellow daisies were made using yellow medium azo, white cadmium yellow medium hue to get the color. Layers create depth. We did the coneflower, and then we did the phlox, and then I did the daisies, and then I just kind of am going back and adding a few more phlox where I think that it would look good, and we just continued this all the way around the piece. We are now ready to start the butterflies. I use a guide, and we are using the Redesigned with Prima Decor Stamps Monarch collection as our guide. And basically, I'm just deciding where I want to place my butterflies amongst my flowers. We're not doing a ton of butterflies, so I'm trying to make sure that I get them strategically placed where I would like. We'll start out by taking our black acrylic paint, just thin, regular black acrylic paint, and a foam roller, and we're just rolling over our stamp. You don't need to use a brayer. You don't need to use anything special. We'll attach it where we would like and just push down to get the effect. I'm using a stamp as a guide. We aren't using the inside of the stamp to actually create the entire portion of the stamp. I'm really just wanting to get the outline. Start painting the interior of this butterfly. I have brought up a similar what I want to create on my phone so that I have a picture to look at. The combination we are using is anthraquinone blue, white, cobalt blue, and powder blue to create a very pretty periwinkle. We'll start by outlining the butterfly with some white around the edges as per our photo. Next, we will add a combination of anthraquinone blue, diazinon purple, and white to get the deep periwinkle coming up the inside of the butterfly. blending of white to the edges to give it definition, and then go back over the center and the body and the antenna with some black. In this next butterfly, we outline the body with black, and then we will go and add white to the entire wing area and touch in the outside with a coral created with white, rose pink, and yellow medium azo. Next, we are going to work on the famous monarch butterfly, which consists of black, cadmium red, cadmium yellow mixed with white to create the lovely yellow, that orange that goes down into a yellow ombre, and of course black to outline all of the detail in the wings and the body.